All right, this video is going to show you how I start Carson's afternoon feed. So this is his feed in a bottle. I'll heat a cup for 3 minutes with water in the microwave and then let it sit until the feed comes up to room temperature or even a little bit warmer. So we're going to pour it into the bag that I've already used for the morning feed and rinse it out. You want to make sure it's not suctioned on itself because you'll spill the food everywhere. So we're just going to pour the food into the bag. And then I use 20 mils of water to rinse the bottle out. And pour all that into our bag. Now, this is a modified bag, so we should be able to prime easily. If you just raise the bag up, you can see the food running through the line by itself. So it'll run its whole way down. If it seems to be going slow, I'll tap the end, or you can even suck on the end of the tip to get it to go faster. And then I'm going to walk this over to the feeding pole with the end in the bag so it doesn't leak. Okay, so now we've got the feed hanging on our pole, and we're going to hook it up to the pump. Open the door, pull the rubber, click it in, close it, turn it on. Now we're gonna set it to the rate. So we do real slow in the mornings, but the afternoon feed we do a quick bolus at 300 mils an hour for about 10 minutes. So you can see here's our line. There's still a little bit of air, so we are going to prime for just a second to make sure we get all the air out. And then you can see the food is starting to come, so we'll stop priming. And now we're ready to hook up to Carson. Okay, now we're ready to start Carson's feed, but we're gonna vent first. So I have my empty vent tube ready. I've got 60 mils of water. I've got a primed feeding attachment and an empty large tipped syringe to vent. So we're gonna attach the empty straight line vent tube and see if we get a big bubble. So usually we'll massage his belly, kind of pat. Sometimes we get a burp that comes out, sometimes not. Oh, there's a little bit. There's a little bit. You okay? All right, so I'm gonna try to pull back with the syringe and see if we can get some air out. Yeah, so there is a bunch of air. We're gonna try the other side. So I angle the tube so the end of it inside of him is facing up on over here or up over here. He seems to have 2 air pockets. And that's where all the air sits in his belly. Yeah. So we've got a whole bunch of bubbles in the tube. You can massage his belly to get them going. You can pinch the line to get them to migrate up. But I just keep doing this back and forth until I'm satisfied that we've gotten, yeah, and we got all the air out of your belly. So you can see we've pulled a little bit of fluid, a little bit of air. So if I couldn't pull back at all, I would probably give him 10 to 20 mils of water, wait a couple minutes, and then try again. You can see we're getting more bubbles. These are just kind of his saliva bubbles. But if they come, we want to get rid of them. Okay. Now we're just going to slowly push this back in. Yes. And I'll push all the fluid until we get to the actual bubbles. If you can see, I'm not going to push these bubbles back in. So we'll clamp off, and we are done venting. And now we will attach, yes, our primed feeding attachment. And we're ready to hook up the food. All right, so we've got the feed. I always wipe the tip off. Make sure you're clamped on the feeding attachment. Open up and connect. I usually do a push and a twist. So now we'll unclamp, and I like to hit the prime button for just a second, because there's usually an air bubble that we can now pull out with a syringe. So I'm going to clamp off. And now I have a syringe that we use our digestive enzyme, and you can see it doesn't dissolve. It just kind of floats. So actually putting an air bubble in the syringe helps you get all of that into him instead of hanging back into the syringe. So we're going to give him the digestive enzyme and use that same syringe to pull that air bubble out. So we're clamped off. We're going to open the med port, unclamp. We're going to pull back on the syringe until you see the air bubble go up into the syringe. Give it a little bit of a shake and slowly push the digestive enzyme in. And I keep shaking just to keep that enzyme suspended, that we can get it all into him. All right, so I'm obviously not going to push that air bubble in. We'll clamp off, close the med port, open up, and we're ready to start the feed. Okay, so we just got an error that said no flow in, and it's probably because we put nut or seed butter in this feed. So if you can see, it looks a little clumpy in the line here. So it's probably stuck in the rubber part inside, and it's not pulling. So I'm just gonna smush the bag a pinch, make sure that seed butter is nice and dissolved. Yeah. And I'm gonna pop this off and pinch the rubber part. And then I'm also gonna just hit prime. Okay, so it is moving. You can see. Okay, so it should be good now. Let's try again. We're gonna turn it back on. Okay, so we just bolused for actually 25 minutes at 300 mils an hour, and he did really good. But now we're going to vent again because he probably has a bunch of more air. So we stop the feed. I'm gonna clamp it off. We're gonna disconnect. the feed line from his tube, and we're gonna reattach. Whoops! Did that hit you in the face? We're gonna reattach the vent tube that we used before, and you can still see there's all those bubbles are still in there. They might pop, and then we get to push that fluid back in, but we'll see. So we'll put this on. Are you helping? Thank you. All right, watch your hand. We're gonna unclamp and see what happens. So again, I'm gonna angle the tube inside of him up. And it looks like, yeah, I'm pulling back on the syringe. We're just getting fluid. So I'm gonna go this way. Still just fluid. Some food. Oh, but here's some air, puffs of air. Yep, we got some puffs of air on this side. Yeah. Lots of bubbles. Lots of bubbles of air. Yeah. All right. So we're at the top of the syringe. I can't pull back anymore, but there's still air in here. So what I'm going to do is just clamp off. I'm going to flip this over. Disconnect. And push the air out. Alternatively, you could get another empty syringe and just use that, but that just creates more things for you to wash. So we're gonna put it back on, unclamp, and keep pulling air. Yeah, you're doing so good. All right, so it's getting harder. I can't pull back now. So that's pretty much what we're gonna get. So again, I'm gonna work, yeah, the bubbles up, out of the tube into the syringe, just by pinching. Sometimes shaking helps, but I'm gonna hold on to the tube if I'm gonna shake the line, just to not jostle that around. Yeah. Okay. So this looks pretty good. We're gonna push all this back in. So you can see, I just pulled all that out of his stomach. Now some kids, they're not gonna tolerate pulling this out, pushing it back in as fast as Carson can tolerate it. But you just do whatever works for your little one. Yeah. So we're just gonna go slow and we're gonna push this back in. We'll be right back. Okay, so we're at the ends. I'm gonna keep pushing, and I don't know if you can tell, this is bubbles right here. So I'm not gonna push that part in. But we'll push up to that, right there, and we'll clamp off. And then usually I'll give him a 5-minute break, and then we'll hook the feed back up and run it at 130 mils until the end. All right, so Carson just pooped on his own, which is amazing. So we disconnected to go clean him up. Now we're gonna reconnect and do his 5 o'clock meds. So we gotta put you on your back. Can you roll? Yeah? Can you roll? Let me see that belly. Let me see that belly. Yes. You did so good pooping on your own. Yeah. All right, so we have our gabapentin. We're gonna unclamp. Oops, no we're not. We're gonna open the med port first, then unclamp. Now I pull back a pinch because there's always an air bubble. And then we'll slowly push our med in. Clamp it up. Yes! And then we'll do about a 10 ml flush. So this was the 60 mils of water I pulled up at the beginning. This is all the water he's gonna get for the med flush and to rinse the bag at the end. And it's just easier for me to do it all in one big syringe. So we'll just give him about 10 mils. Flush his med down. Yeah. Clamp off. And now we're ready to restart our feed. Okay, so we're at the end of the feed. I have it paused right now. But once it gets down to about here, I'll actually stand and pinch the bag like this to push all the food to make sure it gets sucked down into the tube. All right, so now we're down about here. I'm still gonna keep doing this to try to get everything into Carson. All right, so this is probably gonna be the last round of section. You can see it being pulled. And I'm gonna pause it before it pulls any air in. So that's about how much is left. You can see the bag still has so much food stuck. So we're gonna add some water to help get that. So here's my syringe of water from before. So there's about maybe 50 mils in here. I'm just gonna squirt some in the top. You can actually rinse around the lip inside. Make sure it's going down. So I'll probably leave myself, this is probably 15-ish mils. I'll use that to flush Carson at the end. But you can see now we've got water, and I just kind of smush around to get all the food that's stuck dissolved into that water. And now we'll just run this water into Carson at the same rate. All right, so as the water gets sucked in, occasionally I'm just gonna mix it up a bit so you can see that food will stay suspended and get sucked through. All right, so we're getting real close to the end. I'm gonna keep trying to get whatever little food particles are floating on the bottom mixed up into the water so it gets pulled. And trying to pinch the bag so we get all the water and food sucked in without getting a huge air bubble. Okay, so we're getting, yeah, it's gonna be at the end. So I kind of push up, try to get that last bit. So actually I think that's all that's gonna go. It hasn't pulled any air yet, but we're at the end of the feed. So I'm gonna just turn it off. I'm just gonna turn the whole pump off. And then to get everything that's still in the tube into Carson, all we gotta do is pop this off. And again, we have a modified bag, so it will suck everything down. So you gotta make sure that the bag doesn't suction onto itself, because if it's suctioned, the feed won't flow. So you can see this has already flown down. Let's see how far. All right, we're already down. Okay, so you can see, here we go, here's the tube. As you lift the tube up, the feed will just run down into his belly because we've got the modified bag. So just keep pulling the tube up, the feeding bag, and it'll run. Yeah. And then once you get to the feeding attachment, now you can see we've run the air into here. The feed stops here. So we're going to clamp off. We'll disconnect. Then we're going to do our flush with the 15 mils. But we've got that air bubble in here, so you don't want to push that in to him. So into the med port, we'll unclamp, and we're just going to pull back to get that air bubble, and you can see the bubbles popping out. Alright, so that's the whole air bubble, and now we'll just flush the feeding attachment slowly with the 15 mils. But we've got that air bubble in here, so we don't want to push that in, so we'll just keep an eye on it as we go down. And we'll stop right there, clamp off, and we're all done with Carson's afternoon feed. So we'll disconnect his belly. Yeah. And close up his tube. Now if he looks super bloated or super upset, I'd vent again, but normally I'll wait about a half an hour to an hour and we'll vent. Alright, so that was Carson's afternoon feed. I'll do another video to show you how we rinse the bag. And I hope that helped. Thanks.